And welcome into Gator Bytes on the 1010XL.com podcast network, also being simulcast on the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page. Today's Gator podcast is brought to you by Southeast Orthopedic Specialists. They're Northeast Florida's leading orthopedic center, providing an unparalleled level of care across numerous locations in both Jacksonville and St. Augustine. That includes Riverside, Northside, the South Side, the beaches, Fleming Island, and St. John's. He is Graham Marsh. I'm the hacker, Ryan Green. The middle part of June has arrived. We have a College World Series in Omaha to talk about. We got some recruiting news on both the football and basketball front, and we have, well, quite frankly, a ridiculous 2024 football schedule that has been released for the University of Florida. First things first, Graham, how are you, my friend?
Oh, I'm fantastic, Hack. I've missed you.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's been far too long, sir.
It's been a while, and the good thing about this podcast, you can tell how objective we're going to be with your Florida Gator Jumpman shirt that you're wearing on the Gator Bytes podcast. So that's always a key indicator that we're going to break it down right
Correct.
down the middle.
This is objective broadcast journalism at its finest.
There is absolutely no question about that. All right, a couple of things. Let's begin with basketball because I want to spend a majority of time on football. Todd Golden, not a great year one. I'm not breaking any news there. But man alive, you talk to people that cover the sport, Graham, he's doing well in the transfer portal. Starting to pick up some traction on the high school recruiting trail. John Bowl from Orlando, the brother of Bol of the Orlando Magic. One of the top, I think, 30, 35 players in the country, 7'2". I mean, a big man is coming to Gainesville. It appears Todd Golden's starting to figure some things out right now.
For Hackers' hierarchy of families, are the Bulls nipping at the heels of the ETNs right now?
I don't know about that, but it's getting close. That's a good point.
I mean, you got Orlando Magic and Florida Gators.
Yeah, with Bol and Orlando. By the way, Bol turned out to be a pretty good player.
Yeah, he is a good player.
And his younger brother, John, we'll see what happens. He's regarded as a very high school prospect, but, you know, you got to like what you see from Todd Golden right now.
I love what I'm seeing from Todd Golden right now. And I think really any reasonable fan understood that he had a really big uphill battle last season. And then I think most reasonable fans also know that the minute Colin Castleton got hurt, the season was over.
Right.
In terms of trying to compete for anything legitimate down the stretch, the season was over the minute Castleton got injured.
And to be fair, I don't know if they were going anywhere with Castleton anyway.
Correct.
But you're right. Once Castleton went down, it was over.
Hope was gone.
Yeah.
Once he was hurt. So I mean, I'm sure Todd Golden knew this regardless, but I think for even the casual fan that may not know the roster up and down as well, may just not know the sport of basketball particularly well, which is a lot of Gator fans, I think is fair. It's definitely more of a football school. That's even me at times. I think it just made it really clear that, my God, this roster has no depth or talent for a school that has expectations to go to make tournament runs and that type of thing. Because, I mean, one good player gets hurt and all of a sudden you can't compete whatsoever.
Yeah.
So Todd Golden, I think, has attacked this offseason saying, I have to approach this as if I don't have any players at all, basically. I need to go get talent in the transfer portal that's going to help me compete right now. And then also, to your point you just made, I need to recruit at the high school front as well because I'm trying to build a program here. Like, I need talent in 2 years, in 3 years, in 4 years. And you know how basketball is? It's a much more microwave sport than football. You don't get the time necessarily to develop, although even in football, that's the clock has sped up even still. But in basketball, man, in my opinion, there's not much of a rebuild process in basketball because you get a couple of guys and you go.
Well, yeah, I mean,
you know what I mean?
You look at this roster for the Gators, and it's not just Florida. I mean, it's everybody. Go back to Kansas State last year. All 5 of their starters were transfer portal guys, including Keontae Johnson. But when you start thinking basketball, and again, we know that you guys probably aren't thinking basketball right now. That'll come in October or even maybe late September when the season starts, the practices start getting underway. But there's like 10 new guys on this roster.
Yeah.
I mean, the 75% of the roster is going to be new from last year.
And listen, this might be very fan of me. This might be very impatient. I don't know. Use whatever word you want. But what I hope nobody gives me, Don't give me this in January, February if they're struggling. Don't give me, well, these guys never played together. It's a new... Don't give me that. I don't want that.
It's today's day and age in college basketball.
Because go look at any team that's competing and none of those guys have ever played together.
It's going to be that way every year.
Yes. It's very, very, very rare in today's college basketball, if existent at all, that you're going to have 4 to 5 dudes that have been together for a couple of years that have really struggled through and grind. Right. That doesn't exist anymore.
The days of Noah, Horford, Brewer, Green, Lee Humphrey, that's not going to happen.
A class like the 04s, Gator fans, just get used to it. You will never see that again.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean you're never going to see as good as much talent or whatever, because that could change. It just means those guys really grew up together in the sport. Those guys struggled together as freshmen, just trying to figure out how to play the sport, to juniors that really knew what was going on. Those guys developed and they had time. That does not exist anymore. Guys like Joakim Noah, there's no chance they would have come back for that second run. That type of thing. But anyway, back to today's world, this was part of my problem with Mike White towards the end. It was like, why, like, people are telling me that, oh, you can't expect this out of Florida because, they're not Duke, they're not Carolina. Okay, well, Baylor's winning national championships. So, and again, I'm not saying that Florida's got to win a national championship. That's not what I'm saying whatsoever. I'm just saying that I don't want to hear the excuses that they haven't played together long enough and all that, because that's not college basketball. College basketball is, let me get a transfer and maybe one high school kid that can really hoop, and let's go make a run and see how far we can go.
If you have a couple national championship banners in your arena like Florida does, I'm not saying you got to win it every year, but you need to be in the tournament pretty consistently, and that was a problem for the Gators for a while there.
I think a realistic, umbrella expectation of that program, and I think you and I sing the same sheet of music on this, is most years make the tournament. If you get a brutal injury or whatever, and 1 year is just not your year, that's okay. But most of the time, make the tournament, and then every 4 to 5 years, let's have a run where we can see what happens.
Agreed.
I think that's fair.
And I don't think that's too much to ask. No,
that's,
I completely
that's not
agree.
me saying that they got to be in the Final Four every year. That's not me saying any of that. It's just every 4 to 5 years, let's have a run where it's the Sweet 16, and you can kind of be like, I don't know, maybe they could, that type of thing.
Today's Gator Bytes podcast is brought to you by Southeast Orthopedic Specialists. For the highest quality care, you can rely on Southeast Orthopedic Specialists for any orthopedic injury or concern. You can log on to their website by going to se-ortho.com, and you can listen for Southeast Orthopedic Specialist, the good doctor, Kevin Murphy, on Thursday mornings in the 7 o'clock hour with Jeff and Dan right here on 1010XL for his weekly analysis of injuries in sports. The basketball team, that's a couple of months away. The baseball team is going for a national championship in the next 2 weeks. It begins, we're recording this on Thursday. It begins tomorrow on Friday in Omaha as they take on Virginia. The first time the Gators have been to Omaha, I believe, since 2017 or 2018. It's about 5 or 6 years since they've been to the College World Series. It was dicey for a while. You lose to Texas Tech. Regional weekend, you had to win 3 games in basically 27 hours. Florida did that. They then play a South Carolina team that had swept them in the regular season. Really hard-fought win in Game 1, a dominating pitching performance in Game 2. And here we are, Graham, Omaha bound, the Gators and Virginia tomorrow. And Florida enters as the number 2 national seed. So one would think, based on that number, they got to be one of the favorites in this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I won't sit here and pretend I watch every pitch of Florida baseball, but that's a good program, man. And I think the last time, again, a bigger baseball fan would be able to correct us on this, but I think the last time they made Omaha, they won the national championship. 2017, I believe. They may have made it the next year and then not won it, but they were in Omaha, something like that. But
they hadn't made it to a super regional since that 4 or 5 year stretch too. So This is, I mean, look, Kevin O'Sullivan, there's going to be a statue of him in Gainesville at some point.
100%.
He doesn't have to prove anything to anybody.
Is it?
But it had been 5 years, so this is a nice little run to know that they can get back there.
Is it? And again, I don't know the sport of baseball enough to maybe be able to really competently make a strong argument here, but can Kevin O'Sullivan throw his hat in the ring of most underrated Gator coaches?
underrated Gator coaches.
Yeah,
well,
just within Gator Nation, within Gator fans, and like
yeah, because
coaches
baseball.
across the sports.
I mean, you're always going to have Spurrier. You're always going to have Billy. You're always going to have Urban. I mean, those three will be the top three forever. And then I don't know where you would go after that. I mean, O'Sullivan might be 4. After Urban Meyer, or after, depending on what order you want to do, Steve Spurrier, Urban Meyer, Billy Donovan. That'd be an interesting question.
My point is, if you walked around the swamp on a college football Saturday and there's 90,000 strong in the stands and you went and asked 100 people who is Kevin O'Sullivan, I think there'd be a decent amount of people that wouldn't know.
I think it depends on age.
Yeah, that's probably true.
I think it depends
on
age. And then your baseball crowd,
fair.
Right? I don't know what the baseball crowd is. I'll tell you this, though, about college baseball. And I've noticed this because they have a pitch clock, too, now. And the TV coverage is so much better. Every Gator postseason game has been accessible on television. Every one. That was not always the case. Going back 10 years ago, maybe more recent than that. But you could find Gator games all the time now. I watched every bit of the regional and every bit of the super regional. Man, I was locked in. So
I've Gator been behind the camera for many of those games.
Yeah, you used to do that with Gator Vision, right?
Well, Gator Vision's a creative side, but I used to run for like SEC Network. And
for SEC Network, yeah. So
be outfield cam or whatever.
And look, the number 2 national seed, they start tomorrow against Virginia. Virginia's a tough ball club. We'll see what happens. Wake Forest is the number 1 national seed. I saw Wake Forest beat Alabama like 23-5 in one of the super regional games. So,
it's time Alabama struggled in a sport.
Well, yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. We're certainly rooting for Kevin O'Sullivan and the Florida Gators to bring home that national championship. To football. And there are a couple angles I want to get to on football here. I want to get to recruiting, and I want to get to what was announced earlier this week, which to me, daunting's not even doing it justice, what the 2024 Florida Gator football schedule is going to be. Quickly to recruiting. There seems to be a disconnect, and I want to get your thoughts. You're a Gator alum. You got the orange and blue blood flowing through your veins. There are not a lot of high expectations for Gator football in 2023. I would sign on the dotted line right now for 7-5. You give me 7-5 right now, I'd say, yep, absolutely. Give me a December 27th bowl game, I'll take it.
Me too. We've discussed that on this.
So we're on the same page. Yet when it comes to recruiting, Florida seems to be doing pretty well for their 24 class. Now, I know Gator fans are up in arms. They lost Chauncey Bowens, the running back out of South Florida. He goes to Georgia. I mean, what are you going to do? That happens. But with DJ Lagway and Miles Graham and Phil Simi, the safety from Texas, we'll see if more guys start trickling in here. Miles Graham went on Twitter and said it's really about to pick up, which got Gator fans excited. For whatever reason, the expectation or the lack thereof for the 23 football season on the field is not really having an effect right now on what Billy Napier's doing with this recruiting class for 2024.
Well, it just shows you that winning, it sounds insane, but just winning ball games on the field does not impact recruiting as much as people believe that it does.
That's where I was going to get to.
It doesn't. I mean, look, like all of us, I think every single person that watches Gator games every Saturday, a few years ago when Mullen was new in his tenure, I think the thinking was, well, once Mullen gets a couple of winning seasons in here and they're really looking good on the field, the recruiting's going to follow. The recruiting's going to take care of itself.
That's a good point.
Guess what didn't happen?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Guess why Dan Mullen is not Florida's coach anymore?
And Mullen, I don't think Mullen enjoyed recruiting very much.
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
But by the logic, I think, and I'm going to include myself on this because I had this logic at the time. If you had fought me on this, I would have fought you back. The logic at the time, after a 2018 Peach Bowl win, after a 2019 Orange Bowl win, was that Florida should have no problem reeling in top 3, top 4 classes. And at that point, you'd have the talent to maybe be in a college football playoff and compete for a national championship, see what happens, whatever. And at that, I think there is a level where the winning does help recruit. If you win a national championship, that's a little bit different, but I think people are starting to see that going 8-4, 9-3 versus winning 6 or 7 games doesn't really make a whole lot of difference.
To that point, things are going well for recruiting right now. What if on the field, come Labor Day weekend, Utah gets them by 20, and then Florida turns around and loses to Tennessee, and then Florida turns around and gets absolutely crushed by Georgia? And based on what you're saying, you don't think that's going to have any effect on this recruiting class?
I think there's a difference between a football team that's not winning a ton of games and a football team that doesn't have any hope and has just quit. A team, and I think players and coaches know that. I think if you watch a game and you can tell everybody's laid down and quit, I think it is easier to get recruits to jump ship. But I also think there's a flip side to that where if the team is struggling, but you can tell the coach is maybe building a foundation here, and they may not be winning a lot of football games, though, a recruit might be able to look at that and say, I'm going to get to play very, very quickly. Florida State was able to sell recruits on that the last couple of years, and all of a sudden they've got a better program going.
And Florida State, and I mean, Mike Norvell is the king of the transfer portal.
100%.
Which has helped.
But you can't tell me that a big factor for why he has been king of the transfer portal is that those guys were able to play.
Yeah.
He was going to sell them on, if you come here, you're going to be playing right now. Like, there's no way when Mike Norvell was giving his pitch to Johnny Wilson to transfer from Arizona State to Florida State, it was that, look, man, you can be our number one wide receiver. That's a dream that you can sell kids on, I believe.
Let me ask you this. You and I are both in agreement that Billy Napier is doing a good job on the recruiting trail.
Yes.
Okay. I agree. Absolutely. Let me rattle off some schools here. All right. Ohio State, Georgia, Louisville, Georgia again, Clemson, Texas A&M, Miami, Georgia again, Tennessee, Florida State, Clemson again, Nebraska, Penn State, Louisville again, Pitt, and Florida State. I'll even throw Iowa in there as well. That's the top 41 players in the 247.com recruiting rankings right now for the state of Florida.
That's where they're committed to.
That's where they're committed to. There's one Gator commitment out of the state of Florida that's currently committed in the top 41. If you want to go down all the way, Florida there are 20 players out of the top 48 that are currently committed. All right. Florida has 2 of them, 2 of the 20. You go back to 2023. Out of the top 57 players in the state of Florida, according to 247sports.com, the Gators got 7 of them. That's a problem, right? Why is he doing so well out of the state? Does not appear to be doing well in the state.
I mean, Billy Napier's not from here. He's not from Florida. He doesn't have the ties that another coach might within the state. I mean, Billy Napier's from Louisiana, so I think I hear what you're saying. I don't disagree. I will say, I mean, you've heard me multiple times in this podcast. I think you could probably safely say I'm not the most patient person when it comes to my expectations for different programs in the university and stuff. That in particular, though, I will say I think you do need to be more patient on, because those relationships, especially with high school coaches within the state, take time.
Well, let me throw this at you. All right, Texas, Georgia, Mississippi, Georgia, Maryland, Germany, and Florida. Those are where the current 9 Gator commitments for the class of 2024. 2 of the 9 are from Florida. The other 7 are Georgia, Mississippi, Maryland, Texas, and Germany. It's interesting, right?
It is very interesting. But, I mean, look, recruiting's more national than it's ever been. Should it be that national? Probably not. It's even international this year. It was international a couple years ago because Jeremy Crawshaw is from Australia. But again, I do think that Billy Napier strikes me as the type of coach, unlike Mullen. He does, and this is where I do think Gator fans can sleep better at night when you think about the future of the program. And Mike Norvell is this way too, which maybe might make Gator fans not sleep quite as well, because the biggest rival, I think, their coach has this same mentality. I think both of those guys, for themselves and for what they demand out of their staffs, Both of those guys are not from Florida, but I think they're both coaches that are naturally very likable to other coaches, particularly high school coaches. And they're the type of guys that if both Napier and Norvell are allowed multiple years within their program, which Norvell's kind of getting there to this point, all of a sudden coaches from Orlando and Jacksonville and Miami and Fort Lauderdale and Tampa, when those coaches got to have a kid that's legit, the first coach that they're going to want to talk to is going to be Norvell or Billy Napier.
You would hope for the Gators' sake. I mean, I just pulled up Georgia really quick. Georgia's got 3 players from Florida committed that are in the top 25.
And to that exact point, I know Georgia's out of state, but they're still right there. Georgia's been there long enough to have those relationships. And they're obviously good, obviously when you're winning. But Kirby, I don't think Kirby always had those relationships in Florida.
No, he's recruited pretty well since he's been there. Maybe not to this extent, but I mean, you think about it, the last 3, 4, 5 years, they've been consistently in the top 3. And,
right. And
he's only been there, what's he been there, 7 years? So I mean, by year 3, he was having top 5 recruiting classes.
And it's that I also kind of chalk that up to, if you're recruiting really well overall, you're going to be recruiting well in the best recruiting state.
Yeah. That's the hope. But I mean, at this point, how do you stop that?
You're right. You're right. At some point,
I mean, Georgia's a runaway train right now. How do you stop them?
You're right. At some point, you just mentioned him. Guys like Chauncey Bowens don't need to be flipping, and it's just one guy. We shouldn't lose our minds over one guy. And if there is one position to lose, running back is maybe the least hurtful of this roster and how it looks in the future. But do you disagree with that?
You're the third person I've talked to that said that in the last 4 days. To me, that's trying to make yourself sleep better at night.
It probably is.
They had a running back from South Florida committed to Gainesville for 9 months. He takes an official to Georgia, and he flips on camera, and they post that on Twitter to their thousands of followers. That is a terrible look for the Gators.
I agree with you. I'm saying I was just bringing up things that might
soften the blow a little bit.
But I mean, I don't disagree with you at all. And that's the exact point that we're talking about. At some point, those flips can't happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that you were just saying, how do you combat that? That's how you combat that. When you have a kid that's initially committed to you, don't let him get away.
Well, the problem too now, and I don't know if you're like this, anytime I don't follow recruiting near as much as I used to when I was doing it daily for Gridiron. I mean, I still know who the Gators are looking at, and I have a pretty firm understanding. But what I hate is every time now it's Florida and LSU or in the top final 2, or Florida, LSU, and Georgia in the final 3. Does Florida have a prayer of getting any of those guys? How many Gator hats do we see on tables every single year? And ultimately it's LSU or it's Georgia. Go back to Harold Perkins, prime example. Florida thought they were getting Harold Perkins.
Can you imagine
hats
Harold
on
Perkins?
The table. Goes to LSU, and he's one of the best defensive players in the country.
Can you imagine Harold Perkins on this defense?
Yeah. No, in a fantasy world, I can, and it's a great thought. Here's the thing, though, all right? You could say, well, lack of facilities. That's no longer the case. You could say lack of budget. That's no longer the case. There are no more excuses now. Florida's got the facility. Florida's got the recruiting budget. Places to hide where you're not getting these guys are getting harder to hide from. You got to start getting these guys. You got to start beating teams like LSU and Georgia for them.
The awesome SID from Florida, Rick Hurtado, gave Hayes Carline and I a tour of the new facility when we were down there for the Orange and Blue game. Dude.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. I mean, I haven't seen a bunch of other ones, but I have an extremely hard time believing that at this point, you're going to go somewhere that looks much better than that place.
Yeah, no, I know. They love
that facility is unbelievable. The reason I bring that up is you're absolutely right. These excuses that coaches have had in the past, those excuses are gone, man. And again, let's one more time. I don't mean to keep going back to Dan Mullen, but let's just look one more time at his tenure at Florida. At least early on, the thing about Mullen was, he's not the best recruiter, but damn, can he squeeze every last ounce of talent out of the guys that he's got. Damn, can he scheme up an offense. Last year, I was underwhelmed by Billy Napier on the field as a coach. So that's fine. I mean, you don't have to be Sean McVay to win a title in college football. We know that. But you better be winning these recruiting battles.
Mm-hmm.
And he's certainly made recruiting better, but it needs to continue to get better, and it needs to be it needs to start being top 3, top 4 classes consistently.
Today's Gator Bytes podcast is brought to you by Southeast Orthopedic Specialists. They're Northeast Florida's leading orthopedic center, providing an unparalleled level of care across numerous locations in both Jacksonville and St. Augustine. That includes Riverside, Northside, the South Side, the beaches, Fleming Island, and St. John's. Final moments here. Let's end with the schedule that was released for 2024. Florida is scheduled to play 11 Power 5 games in 2024. Remember, the divisions go away. The schedule was released earlier this week. They go to Texas. They go to Tennessee. They go to Mississippi State. Remember, their out-of-conference is UCF, Miami, and Florida State before you even get to the Southeastern Conference portion of it. Will that change? Could that change? I tend to doubt it. We're getting kind of late in the process here, although you hear rumblings. But at the end of the day, right now, people are actually legitimately talking on social media. Is this the hardest schedule in the history of college football?
Incredible people, too, by the way.
Yeah, like Dan Orlovsky,
yeah.
I mean, ESPN, guys. Again, UCF, Miami, Florida State, Georgia, both Texas teams, both Mississippi teams, LSU, Tennessee. It's like, wow. Your thoughts?
A lot of the harder ones are the road games, too.
Yeah.
Which is especially brutal.
You go to Florida State, you go to Texas, you go to Tennessee, you go to Mississippi State.
My thoughts are that DJ Lagway better be Cam Newton. Because, my God. I mean,
literally, Lagway probably is going to start next year. Again, we're focusing on 24. We haven't gotten to the 23 season yet. Assuming Lagway starts, isn't game 1 against Miami? I mean, that's going to be the introduction to college football.
More than likely.
Playing the Hurricanes, that's going to be tough, man.
Really?
Remember, UCF's in the Big 12 now, so they're a Power 5 team too.
And that's the thing. It's like, not only do you play all those Power 5 teams, but they're not exactly a bunch of Vanderbilts either.
No.
It's good programs,
Florida lost Vandy, Missouri, and South Carolina, and they replaced them basically with Texas A&M, and Ole Miss. So the schedule was already hard, and it just got ratcheted up even more to where there is legit conversation. Is this the hardest schedule ever? This would be an ESPN stats and info question. Has there ever been an SEC team that has 11 Power 5 games? I can't imagine there has been.
I don't think so, no.
Florida's got to be the first with 11 Power 5
When you only play 8
games.
conference games a year, I don't know how it's even been possible to have happened before.
Yeah, I mean, nobody schedules 3 Power 5 non-conference. And Gator fans, I don't want to hear it because most of you, at least the ones here in Jacksonville on 1010XL, I don't want to play the Citadel anymore. I don't want to play East Tennessee State anymore.
It's competition.
I want to play competition. Yeah. I want to have a great experience. You go out there, you try to compete against the best. All right, well, you got it. 2024, you're the winner. You get to compete against the best. And when they go 4-8, then I think your thoughts on that might change a little bit.
And I'm telling you, I'm telling you right now, we've had this conversation 1,000 times. There's a significant, I'm not saying you, I'm not saying me, but there's a significant portion of people that watch Gator games every Saturday that right now are preaching patience with Billy Napier.
Mm-hmm.
I guarantee you, midway through that gauntlet of a 2024 schedule, just like you're talking about, if they're 2-4, those same people are going to be calling for his head.
It's a never-ending cycle. And I got to be, look, I love Gator Nation, but I get the frustration why other fan bases feel a certain way about some Gator fans. People are already calling for Billy Napier's job right now, and he's been there 1 year. You wait. If they go 6-6 this year, they'll be firebillynapier.com and all that, which I think is ludicrous. But after 3 years, then you do need to start winning. And that's his 3rd year. That's what Billy Napier has to compete with a true freshman quarterback, more than likely, against that schedule. It's going to be tough, man.
And what, look at Jimbo Fisher in College Station. I understand that he's no doubt underperformed in his time there, particularly with his contract and what he got paid and all that. I totally understand that. But part of the reason that he's underperformed is because in the past, being in the SEC West has been death.
Mm-hmm.
And they've had a brutal schedule. Take that schedule and ramp it up a notch, and that's what 2024 Florida's schedule is.
Yeah, the home schedule's great, right? Miami, UCF, LSU, Texas A&M, Ole Miss.
From a fun standpoint, it's awesome.
Yeah, it won't be fun. Some of those games won't be fun when the scoreboard says in the fourth quarter, but it'll be fun talking about it leading in. When there's legit talk, is this the hardest schedule ever in the history of college football? It's hard to have a lot of positive expectations going into 2024.
And I think, again, you and I are on the same page on this, and certain 1010XL counterparts are not. But I think those cupcake games that these teams have gotten used to, which I think are slowly going away, not just for Florida, but I think in general in college football, a lot of those cupcake games that teams have played in the past, those are going away a lot. And with Florida, it seems like, Jesus, they're totally gone. It's one of those things that fans have complained about those games for a long time. And I think it's one of those things that you really don't appreciate until they're gone.
Agreed.
You know what I mean? Until you no longer have those 2 or 3 wins that fluff up your schedule and your record a little bit and, make things a little more manageable at the end of the season. And if you got a young quarterback, let him kind of go almost like a preseason game type of thing. That it's going to be tough to not have any of that. Those records could look ugly fast.
Good luck to Gator Baseball out in Omaha. They get started tomorrow against Virginia. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. We've got media days on the horizon. Fall camp kicks off in less than 6 weeks, and then we'll be back weekly here on Gator Bytes. He is Graham Marsh. I'm the hacker Ryan Green. Thank you for watching and listening on 1010XL.com and on the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page.